training school in 1939, passed and was commissioned in, we actually passed in June of 1939, but my commission dated from the 2nd of October. But having passed, when I was called up and served on the 3rd of December 1939, and was transferred from the 3rd Field Company, militia, to the 38th Fortress Company at Fort Largs.
And that is now part of the AIF, is it, that you'd moved into the AIF at that stage?
Yes, I did. I became a captain in the militia, but I got into the AIF twice actually. Unbeknown to them, I got into the Armoured Division as a captain, SX 11747. I think I've told you. They found out who I was and that I was in a reserve defence activity at Fort Largs, protecting the electricity station at Osborne and the gas company at Osborne, and there were German raiders at the bottom of the Gulf. So it was an important activity. And when they found out that SX 11747 was really Captain Harry Medlin from the 38th Fortress Company, I was discharged. I then joined again when the 23rd Brigade of the 8th Division was being assembled for the forward defence of Australia. From Timor, Sparrow Force, to Ambon, Gull Force, and Rabaul, Lark Force, something like 5,000 soldiers, foolishly and stupidly, for the forward defence of Australia. Now, can you imagine that when the Japanese were known to be landing, when the war started, a division in each of those places, and what can 1,000 or 1,200 troops do? Except, to be fair to the independent company, who went from Kupang to the Portuguese end of the island, Portuguese Timor, they, at the moment the Japanese landed, they went bush. And they learned what the Americans had learned at the time of the War of Independence, that hit and run tactics are far superior to fixed defence activity. And they did a superb job, and finally they escaped, and they won the friendship of the Portuguese Timorese, most of whom were Roman Catholic. Timor was an interesting island. It was Roman Catholic on the Portuguese end, and it was Dutch Reformed Church on the western end.
Can we just go back to you've joined the unit, and can we just get you moving into Darwin and then moving on to Timor?
Yes, well, when I joined the AIF, the very next day I caught up with Sparrow Force, that part of Sparrow Force that had come through from the eastern states. They were in South Australia, and I joined them there just below Peterborough, and we then went overland by train to Alice Springs, and we then went at density of 2 vehicles to the mile on the dust road from there to Burdham, where we got on the train again and went from Burdham to Darwin, and arrived typically for the army unannounced and unwelcome, but and we had to build our own huts. But I was commissioned as a field engineer officer, and even though I was now in a fortress company, I was skilled in lashing and all that stuff, so could provide useful advice to our troops on how to build their own beds and their own huts in Larrakia barracks.
Now, around what date did you arrive in Darwin?
We arrived in Darwin on the, I think it was about the 8th of August, 1941.
And then you, as you say, you built your accommodation. Did you do any training during the period between that date and when you left for Timor?
It was incredible. A lot of our stores were marked for Timor, but yet it was supposed to be a secret where we were headed for. We were given no encouragement to learn the local language or even to learn Malay. I never learnt Malay until I was a prisoner of war, and the Japanese wouldn't speak English and we wouldn't speak Japanese, so we communicated in Malay. Now, we should have learned it. It was some years later, some years after I got home, that I came across a booklet in the Malay language, and it was censored. The military brass at Victoria Barracks in Melbourne. I've been very persuaded by a book written by a fellow called Nixon on the psychology of military incompetence, and I'm sure you have read it. It is. I feel able to draw attention to that book because one chapter criticises academic incompetence. So it's not just the army and the military who's being criticised, but pomposity is a very unattractive quality. And there was a pomposity and a stupidity about Darwin. We left Darwin immediately after the Japanese unceremoniously attacked Pearl Harbor and Singapore on the 8th of December. And I know you pointed out to me how there was some criticism of the wharfies in Darwin. But within my experience, there was no problem with the wharfies. I went on the HMAS Westralia, an armed merchant cruiser, and the wharfies were very helpful. We got immediately, and I'd been acting adjutant to the chief engineer of the 7th Military District, Brigadier Beale, and we packed up very quickly on the 8th. We left Darwin on the 10th, and we got to Timor and landed in Kupang Bay on the 12th of December 1941.
And what were conditions like in Timor? And was it clear to you then that the war was building up?
Oh yeah.
Because to all intents and purposes, like Pearl Harbor seemed to be a surprise to people, but you're arriving around the same time, aren't you?
Well, we arrived within days of. We were poised to occupy, as I say, the forward defence of Australia from Timor to Ambon to Rabaul. It was obvious to me. I don't know why. Look, I've always wanted an education, and I've striven for it the whole of my life, and I'm still doing it. I knew the geography of the area. I knew where Japan was. I was aware. I'll just go back a bit as to why I joined the army. So there was my father's record, but as a young fellow, I was about 14 when I read Hitler's Mein Kampf. And a lot of people never heard of Mein Kampf even now, My Struggle. And he says what he was going to do. He declared his anti-Semitism. And I was not aware at the time, although perhaps marginally aware, of the Harada. Harada was Prime Minister of Japan in 1929, and he issued the Harada testimonial for Hirohito, or Hirohito. I know how to pronounce Hirohito. And they just said what they were going to do. The Greater East Asia Co-Prosperity Sphere, the Southern Oceanica Policy. And as I say, as a young fellow, I was aware of it, and I was aware of the local geography. One day, our commanding officer in Timor, Major Athol Wilson, a friend of mine, but he was about 15 years older than me, and I thought he was an old man, but he came into the mess and he said the Japs are in the Moluccas. Now, of all the officers there, I was the only one who knew that the Moluccas were just about 500 or 600 miles away, and that we were therefore in for a hiding. And knowing that, and knowing the speed with which they had come down through the archipelago,